has created, what did I just cut out? No, okay. Sorry, I got a reconnection. Sorry about that. So in 8 years, Lemonly has created infographics and visual stories for international brands like Marriott, the MLB, Netflix, Marvel, and Green Bay Packers, and the United Nations. John's goal is to make Lemonly the best place to work in the Midwest, and writes about company culture and building great teams in his newsletter, pointletter.com. John loves to cheer on the Minnesota Twins and spend time with his wife and daughters. So I'd like to welcome you to the New Laws of Leadership, Tools for Your Mind and Career in the Year 2020. I'll hand it over to you, John.
All right. Thank you so much. Let me just kind of do some housekeeping. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Cool. And I know I'm sharing my screen. I don't see my video though. Can you guys see me?
Yep, we can see you.
Okay. I can't see myself, but as long as you can see me, that's all that matters. Perfect. All right. Well, the only last piece of housekeeping is I'm going to have time at the end for questions, but I'm also not afraid to, if you have a question that's a burning question, jump right in and put it in the chat. I might just have you guys have to just interrupt me and let me know if there's any questions in the chat. Otherwise, we'll take it at the end. So awesome. I'm so excited. Thank you for being here. I know it's one more Zoom call. I know we're probably pretty tired of Zoom calls, but we're going to talk about some of that today actually, and how we can increase engagement and purpose and be leaders. And so as teachers, I think you guys are the best leaders out there. And a lot of what I want to talk about today is really democratizing leadership, or looking at leadership in a different way. I think our world needs more leaders. I think that 2020 and COVID especially has exposed a lot of our leaders, both good and bad. And this was an idea that I had even before 2020 started. And now I really feel driven to help create more leaders. And I think they exist all over the organization, up and down, whether you're a CEO, an intern, it doesn't matter your age or your paycheck, you can be a leader. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So a little bit about me, just for some background. Oh yeah, by the way, I'm going to bring the fire today. I said, I know it's 1 o'clock. You guys have been on Zoom calls all morning. You probably just had lunch. So I'm going to go quick. I got a lot to cover. I promise that I'll bring the fire. We're going to talk about Lemonly first briefly, just so you understand who the heck I am. Lemonly is a company that my co-founder and I started, almost 9 years ago in like 2 weeks, August 15th. We're based in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. This is our office right there, downtown on Main Avenue. Come stop by for a tour. If somebody is there, our office is like quote unquote open. We've actually really transitioned to, we were always very remote friendly. We've had remote employees since 2011. When we started the company, our first employee about 4 months later was remote. But now we're really moving from remote friendly to remote first. And so it's really up to people where, when, and how they want to get their work done, as long as they get it done. And so on many days, the door is locked and maybe 1, 2, 3 people are here. So, but still stop by post-COVID, we'll definitely give you a tour. And yeah, so based in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, we are the home of the world's best infographics. So if you don't know, you guys are teachers, you totally know what an infographic is. I mean, hopefully the textbooks are full of them. We are wired as humans to be visual communicators. It's how we learn. Visuals attract our eyes and our brain. And our brain actually processes images about 60,000 times faster than it does plain text, right? So I think about school and my school days and like the figure 1.1, right? Here, see figure 2.3. Those visuals to really enhance the learning, push the learning forward. There's a lot of science and psychology that back that. So an infographic essentially is just the marriage of words and data with visuals told in a visual story. So we believe that when we take storytelling, we remember things, and when we take visuals, they're attractive, they capture our attention, and the story really holds our attention. And so the marriage of those two things is an infographic. We're a 17-person company. Like I said, right now we have Vancouver, New York City, and then South Dakota. I would say Sioux Falls. Most people are in Sioux Falls, but some people have gone home or worked remotely. But so 17 people, so that means designers, project managers, we have writers, sales, operations, that type of thing. So generally a younger company, we would fall in the millennial, Gen Z, probably bucket. And so I think you guys hopefully can relate to some of that as teachers too, and even further down in terms of the generations that you're working with. So like I said, we're almost 9 years old. We've created over 3,000 projects, different visuals. So now it's not just infographics, videos, ebooks, reports, with over 400 different clients. And so you might recognize some of our friends: Marriott, Major League Baseball, Netflix, Salesforce, Disney, the Green Bay Packers, the United Nations, really all over the map in terms of industry. I'd say the commonality: clients that work with Lemon.ly value good design. They value the way things look and their credibility and the authority that good design brings with it, and storytelling. And they want to tell their story, in a visual way. So basically, at the end of the day, we help you get your message heard. So we live in a very confusing world with a lot of information, fact checking, social media, tweets, all these things coming at us constantly. We need to cut through the noise, make it clear and simple. And so really what we say, our mission statement, we call this our core focus, is we design clarity. We help your message be easier to understand, more compelling. So enough about that. I don't want to make a pitch about Lemon.ly, but just want to explain where I come from and what I do. So I think the two things we do well are tell stories and write color pictures, right? Not that different than teachers maybe, or at least students. So I think emojis are super powerful. They say a lot in a simple, small little icon or visual. And so I have some of those baked in here. But today we want to talk about leadership, and really what leadership looks like, in my mind, in the 2020 world, which is a different world. It's changed. What did my sister was sharing a link yesterday to, it was something recalling like 6 months ago was the Super Bowl, and the controversy that the halftime show with like J-Lo and Shakira, and all the controversy that caused in terms of their clothing and their dancing, and we just both joked, like, I wish we could go back to that being our biggest concern, right? The Super Bowl halftime show, only 6 months ago. So the world has changed rapidly, and we at Lemon.ly have really adopted the mentality of the new normal, right? For us, we don't really necessarily believe in like back to normal. It's finding a new normal. And so a lot of what I want to talk about today in leadership is how mindset, communication, and all those type of things, we can break through these tough times and actually come out stronger on the other end. So normally when you come to Lemon.ly, you'd probably be greeted here by Emily, our office manager, sitting up at the front desk with a smile and usually a bottle of water, and sit down at the chair. Leadership looks like this. It looks like communication. It looks like one-on-one meetings. It looks like people working together to accomplish a goal or a task, but it has to look a little bit different. So when I think of leadership, I think of two things: engagement and purpose. And really, if you've heard of Lemon.ly, sometimes people have heard of Lemon.ly for our culture, but they don't even know what they do. So I've actually heard people be like, "Oh yeah, Lemon.ly, I've heard of you guys. What do you do?" And so we take pride in that. We're known for our company culture. I do some speaking about that. We write about it on our blog. One of my goals when we started the company was to make Lemon.ly the best place to work in the Midwest. I wanted you to come, whether you didn't really know or care if it was Monday or Friday. Certainly Fridays are more exciting, right? The weekend is around the corner. But coming to work was not a obstacle or a fear, or like it was something that you were excited to do because you felt engaged with your work and you also felt purpose in your work. And that's what we're going to talk about here. So let's start with engagement. What are ways we can create more engagement? I think this will apply very well to the classroom, right? So how can we get students engaged, and how can we get students to find purpose in their work? So engagement looks a little bit different today because we maybe can't give high fives or sit next to the water cooler and talk. So it looks something like this, like the Brady Bunch, right? We're all on Zoom, and we now know what all of our team members' living rooms look like. A little bit different than, like I said, 6 months ago. So, we do a Monday morning meeting, it's called. It's our company all hands. It's every Monday at 10:30. We did it yesterday, 35 minutes usually. And during COVID, this was in April when we were really in the thick of it, Amberly from our team announced that she and her husband were expecting their third child, and held up the sonogram there on her phone. and everybody got excited. And so we talk about celebrating wins at Lemonly a lot. And I think in general, as people, we don't do a great job of celebrating our wins. I think especially as South Dakotans, right? So we take a lot of pride in like being hard workers, which is great, but we also like put our head down, we do the job, put our head up and get the next job and on to the next job, right? But we need to step back, we need to pause, we need to take a break, we need to learn from that lesson, celebrate the win, celebrate the accomplishment, and then go on to the next one. And so the lesson here is making sure that an engaged workforce also feels like they're acknowledged, they're heard, and they're celebrated. And so it's a little bit different, like it used to be. This would be, high fives and hugs, but still really important moments like this, important life moments that are never going to stop, no matter what's going on in the world, need to be celebrated and people needed to be treated like people. So a lot of, I think, what drives my perspective on company culture is I started my career out of college in a corporate consulting gig. And so I would go in New York or in Minneapolis, I would go to the Best Buy headquarters in South Minneapolis. And I worked for a company called Accenture. About 6,000 people would go to work at these headquarters back then every day. I'm sure it's less now. Best Buy is probably struggling a little bit. And of those 6,000, 2,000 of us were consultants. And outside of the color of our badge, it was green instead of yellow, you wouldn't have known any different. We all showed up, we all had the same, dress code, and we worked on our computers and got work done. And I was pretty good at pivot tables for a while. But I guess call me a millennial. This is my first job right out of college. I didn't feel engagement or purpose. I didn't feel like my work really mattered or had meaning. And I sometimes felt like if I didn't come to work out of those 6,000 people the next day, would people even notice, right? Would I feel like the work that I did mattered? And so that's what driven a lot of what kind of shaped Lemonly, is realizing I want to have a place. Certainly it's easier to do, obviously, with 17 versus 1,700 or 17,000. But even in the scope of a school or the scope of a classroom or the scope of a small group, right? How do we make that? And by starting by engagements, making people feel valued. So this is even I don't think this was that same particular Monday, but this is the agenda. This is just a Google sheet it's called This Week at Lemonly, our Monday morning meeting. We start by celebrating the win. Sometimes it's finishing up a client project. Sometimes it's as fun as like we did a little water challenge success. This is back in February, like make sure you're drinking enough water. We talk about completed projects. That's an extension of celebrating wins, making sure people's work is shown up front and center. And people can kind of be celebrated and we can give props and claps. But another big part about engagement is being aware of what's going on and being kept up to date. And so we have weekly announcements, something that's happening, a group that was coming through, this was, SDSU students were coming through the office that day. It's time to get ready for election period for your 2020 healthcare benefits or whatever the things are. Getting everybody, we run the company very openly. The part that you don't see here on the bottom of this agenda is our weekly scorecard. So we actually run through the numbers and how many sales calls, how much revenue did we book, how much revenue are we doing this current month, and what are we projecting for next month? My hope is that everybody at Lemonly should know pretty quickly and pretty easily if Lemonly is going to have a good month or a bad month. We're all in this together. And so a lot of that engagement starts with freeing up information and getting people on the same page. And I really admire what you teachers had to go through. I mean, I don't admire, but I admire you guys for going through the challenge of having to rethink a classroom virtual essentially overnight, right? Over a weekend or whatever it was back in March. Hopefully now, regardless of where things fall this fall, you have a little bit more thought and time to think about what that looks like. But I think that is really challenging. And so in a virtual space, more than ever, we need to be on the same page. And part of that makes information accessible as a company, making conversations accessible, but also not constraining in terms of in the communication world, having asynchronous communication versus synchronous, meaning maybe we don't all have to be on call, on job, on chat at the same time. So this is an example of how we do that through our Monday morning meeting agenda. And I mentioned the water challenge. Little things can help with engagement. So like we did a vegetable challenge. Can you get 7 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, which is we pulled in data from South, or from the government, from the health, what's the organization I'm looking for anyway, like data about what the recommended serving should be. And we tracked it, and we did what we do best at Lemonly, which is visualize it, made it a little bit of a challenge. There was a little reward and a prize, but something that even as small as this in a classroom, in a company, in a team can create a lot of engagement. And then lastly, I think in the spirit of that asynchronous chatting kind of culture that, at least in the corporate world or the business world we live in, and you know, at times probably even in the classroom world now, information needs to be accessible and free, right? When we're left in the dark, that's when we start to become disengaged, and then eventually, of course, lose purpose. So one example, this is a screenshot of our Slack channel. We have all these different Slack channels. And Amberly, this is hers, keeps it a lot more, or Morgan's looks like. Mine's much more organized, or like a lot of them that I don't need to see. But a couple little things I want to call out. One, in the bottom right corner, you'll see out of our 17 people, this is back pre-COVID, the screenshot, but the tiny little emoji, like I said, says a lot. This would tell you if you're at HQ, you have the lemon emoji. If you're at home, like Carly and Daphne were, they have the home emoji. And something even as subtle and small as that can let people know, like, that's where they are. That's what they're doing right now. It could be the doctor's appointment. It could be playing with your kids. It could be at home or at HQ. And so that little green dot says if you're online or not. I think this is the transition that Lemonly is making. We've been remote friendly, but how do we get to remote first, where people really can do their job on their own time and schedule? And it won't get completely 100%. We have clients, we have meetings that have to happen. But the other part I wanted to call out was this screenshot of overtime policy. So, you know, yes, I'm always accessible. I have an open door policy here at the office, which I joke about because I don't have an office. I sit out on the floor with everybody else. But information needs to be able to, so we have a handbook, right? Which is not too big. It's visual and it's clarity. That's our job. But you can get buried into some of the sections. So then each policy also has a Slack channel where the policy is put there, any FAQs below that. And at any point, at any time, people can go back and access that. One thing that we often forget in building teams is that everybody joined at different times. You know, so we're almost a 9-year-old company. What we look like today compared to 4 or 5 years is so different, you know, and so we're always improving and getting better. But we forget that, like, oh, this decision or this announcement was made a year ago. Carly didn't work here then. And so we can't assume that she knows everything, that she was a part of that conversation, that the lingo and all the questions that were asked. And so documenting and keeping information open and accessible is a really great way to keep people engaged. So engagement is the first step. We need to feel excited, connected to, aware of the work that we're doing. That can be in a classroom, it could be on a team, could be in a company. Because then once we're engaged, we can go the next level deeper, which is really purpose. And so at Lemonly, if you come to work at Lemonly or you come to visit, I guess, when you come in, this could be someone's high school, right? You might think these came from, these lockers actually, when we, 5 years ago, when we moved into our office, came from Chancellor Elementary School, which unfortunately had to consolidate. But for our benefit, we found lockers that almost like perfectly fit our brand colors. And so when you come in, there's probably 14 or so lockers on the left, almost looks like you're in high school. And above those lockers are our 3 core values of adventure, collaboration, and integrity. And core values at Lemonly are how we hire, it's how we recruit people, it's how we promote people, it's how we fire people if we have to, it's how we do annual reviews, it's how we decide if there is a controversial project or client, if we want to work with them or not. It's how we decide if there's a client that isn't acting with integrity or isn't collaborating with us that we need to move on from or let go of. And when you know what you stand for, this helps you achieve purpose. And so I'm a big fan of the Broadway musical Hamilton. In that show, if you've seen it on Disney Plus now, there's the line that Hamilton raps to Aaron Burr: "If you stand for nothing, Burr, what do you fall for?" And this idea that if you don't stand for anything, if you don't believe anything, then you really can't, you know, fall for anything. And this has become so apparent and so true to me in 2020 amongst our leaders, is what they stand for and what they value, who they represent, and who they work for, and the core values that they are going to stand on. And so ours is simple, it's clear, right? Very very on Lemonly, on brand, but each one of these words means something to us. And when we talk about purpose, when you as a company can stand for something, then the people in that company or the people on that team or the students in that classroom know what people value in this space. They know what they're going to learn, what they're trying to achieve, the outcome we're trying to get to. I'm always very clear that Lemonly, we are a team, we're not a family. You have your own family, you go home to your family, but as a team, we're working together in pursuit of a common goal, and we're trying to get better every day and always improve ourselves. So I think knowing what you stand for, I even love the idea of having personal core values, right? So that's something that my wife and I talk about. And what are our family core values that we want to bring forward to our two little daughters, right? So even the idea of a classroom core values, I think it would be super powerful. And this is what I'm talking about when I say that leaders exist in all shapes and sizes, and leaders let the world know what they stand for and what they believe in. So we believe in adventure, collaboration, integrity. And when that is known, we can push that down into the organization. So one idea that came, adventure to us is taking risk. It's getting uncomfortable. It's trying new things. So a story here, Ashton, who was the one on the last picture, putting those core values up. She came to me because about a year ago, we had a really, really talented designer leave the company. She was working remotely from Vancouver, so talented. And she left, and in that, we did an exit interview, which I always recommend doing an exit interview. And I asked her, what would have had to change for you to stay at Lemonly? How could we have grown, or what were you looking for? Was it more money? Was it something else? It wasn't more money. It wasn't, she loved the team, she loved the people, but she just wanted to do a different type of work that she wasn't sure if she'd ever get to do at Lemonly. So in many ways, her move made sense. And it was probably the right move for her, and ultimately then for us, if it's the right move for her too. But she did say, I always felt like I knew where Lemonly was going as a company. You as a leader did a good job of saying where Lemonly was going, but I didn't know where I fit into that. How does my trajectory align or not align with Lemonly? And so Ashton developed this plan. It's called our PGP, our personal growth plan. So every person in the company has this Google Doc, this document that they fill out. It's only shared between them and their managers, and then I can see them as well. And we start with things that we know. Every year at our company retreat, we do things like Strengths Finder or Enneagrams, right? Hopes and fears of where you want to go in your life, your pillars or your core values. Then we ask you questions like, you get the best of me win, you get the worst of me win, my biggest lesson ever, the thing I'm most proud of. And then one thing we do when we hire at Lemonly is we ask people to rank what's important to them: salary, benefits, PTO, where they're based, their job title, the type of work they do. We ask them to rank those things, and then every year to re-rank them, because what we've learned is things change, right? Years ago, we didn't offer healthcare at Lemonly. We were a pretty new little startup. We were scared of embracing that expense. Amy and I took a survey of the people to see what do you value, and healthcare came back fourth. And we thought, well, that's weird. We probably feel like we should add this, but if it's fourth, why is it fourth? People want more money instead. And when we really dug into that survey results, this is, like I said, years ago in the company, we found that most of our people were still under the age of 26 and thus on their parents' healthcare plan. And so that wasn't a priority for them at the time. And we have since added that, and our team has since also grown up. We have lots of little lemon heads and families and things like that growing now. So these things change, and people are allowed for them to change. And so this document is a place where all this lives. And when I know this about people, the way I like to think of it is Lemonly, we have this trajectory as a company, as an entity, ups and downs and zigs and zags. And so do individuals. And hopefully for a while, those two things will intersect and really align and parallel. But at some point they probably won't, and they will move on and crisscross or diverge. And that's okay. And knowing that, but talking about it is really important. So in the spirit of adventure, in the spirit of integrity, we want the company to grow, but we also want you to grow, whatever that looks like, so you can achieve your hopes and dreams. And so this is really when you unlock purpose, when someone understands why they're learning a topic or a subject matter. They understand why they're going to school. They're understanding why maybe they're going to school in a different circumstance, because 2020 is a different world. And so thinking about ways to unlock purpose can really be a powerful driver, because in my setting, in a company, in the business setting, it isn't always money. It's rarely money. It isn't always PTO or days off. There's always much more that we as humans want to accomplish and why we come to work. We spend a whole lot of time at work in our lives, so we definitely need to figure out how to make it purposeful. All right, so engagement and purpose, that's what I'm looking for as a leader. For us, that I believe a lot of that comes down to communication. These ideas that I'm talking about is about being on the same page. It's about being honest, about being upfront. So we apply these concepts in our work with our clients. And so what we've learned over almost a decade is communication should have brevity, clarity, and consistency. Brevity, only say what needs to be said, right? The run-on, the 20-page document, the 1 hour talk, the company, you know, like the break room discussion that goes 90, like keep it short, keep it simple. Clarity is that simple part, like only, you know, make it really, really clear. Let's not have room for misinterpretation. Let's not have gray. Let's try to keep it black or white and make things very clear about what you're trying to say. So that's where visuals are really, really powerful. Sometimes words can be misleading, and sometimes words across different culture, different boundaries, different language barriers can mean different things. If I show you a circle, it's a circle. If I try to describe a circle to you, it's more complex, right? Maybe there's some geometry teachers on the call that can knock that out, but I'm thinking it's like a round plane figure with all the sides are equidistant from the center, right? And there's a lot of words to unpack there, and it's been a long time since I was in high school geometry. So, and then lastly, consistency. And this is where I think of really great teachers and leaders are super consistent when they communicate. And so that means both in the cadence of when, if you start your day with a kind of an all hands, we'll call it, but like an entire classroom chat, do that every day, because the students and kids get used to that. I do that Monday morning meeting, so they always know we're on the same page. But also consistency of format. If you like to do in the business world, if it's a video, if you're a writer, you can write an internal memo or email. Could be a podcast. We have clients, we help clients with this stuff, but being consistent in how you communicate and when you communicate is incredibly powerful. And so thinking about culture, we actually really think at the end of the day, culture is communication. So, you know, you hear about these Silicon Valley companies with beer in the fridge or ping pong tables, or we'll change your oil when you come to work. That's cool, but that's not culture. Culture is core values. It's what you stand for and believe in, and you achieve it through good communication. And so at the end of the day, and this totally applies, I believe, to teachers, to schools, to school districts, is your communication is your culture, and your culture is your communication. And you're thinking, okay, that sounds really buzzwordy. What does that mean? It means what you say says a whole lot about you and what you believe in. So the way we talk at Lemonly defines our culture. But also when you're thinking about how should we talk, what should we say? Do we make a statement about what's going on? How do we feel about mask or no mask? Your culture should help you define what you should say. And your culture is defined by those core values, right? So our culture is adventure. We are going to be bold. We are going to take risk. Our culture is also collaboration. And that doesn't just mean with each other as team members. It means with our clients. It means with our community. We're going to be a good neighbor. We're going to be a great citizen. And so those things define how we talk, and how we talk defines who we are, is what that means. All right, so about perfectly at the halfway point. So I want to move into a little bit of mindset, and then we're going to talk about leadership with some questions. So I have a story about an oil man, and you might know this guy. This is John D. Rockefeller, a pioneer of America during especially the industrial era, and probably one of the most wealthiest men who's ever lived. Rockefeller's story is pretty interesting. So he got his first job at 16 years old. He came from a broken home. His dad was a criminal. At 16 years old, he got a job. It's not even really accountant. He was like kind of almost like a controller, you would call it today, but just like kind of tracking money. He was making 50 cents a day in 1985. He had this vision of always being essentially like an investor, like a stock guy, like not like he's trading stocks on the exchange, but like a venture capitalist or private equity guy. He had this vision. He always sought out that. Growing up in Cleveland, Ohio, started at 16. A few years later, there was a financial crisis, just really, really rough. Similar to what we thought it was going to be a few months ago. Still don't know what, the stocks are pretty confusing these days. but he lived through this first financial crisis at a young age, 18 or 19 years old. He could have just given up. He basically was wiped entirely clean, and he could have gone and chosen like a safer career, but he was so set and determined about doing this career and this job. And he would later go on, this is 1855. So he lived through the Civil War in America. He lived through all the way even to the Depression, to several financial crises. And he was always so dead set and committed on his dream and his vision that actually whenever these crises happened, they didn't quite, he would have lived through the 1918 pandemic as well, which we always compare to this one. In all of these situations though, he always said that this was his opportunity. This was his time to really sharpen his sword to I think of like the Warren Buffett quote that he says when it comes to financial investments is be greedy when others are fearful and be fearful when others are greedy, right? And so during this time, Rockefeller really got to know his expertise, and he leaned in heavily, and he recognized that during these times, while others were pulling back, while others were afraid, maybe leaving their careers, giving up, losing hope, he was going to go in harder, faster, stronger, be more confident, be more convicted in what he believed in. And I love this story because I think it teaches a lot about mindset. And it's been something that I've been trying to teach not only myself, but the team during Lemonly. I've told them, I believe the world has changed. And so if Lemonly looks the same coming out of this, whenever the end of this is, then we will have failed. If we look the same going out of this as we did going in, we will definitely have failed. If the world has changed, then we need to change as a company too. And it's the great business line, or you can apply this to anything, which is don't waste a good crisis. Crisis is hard. None of this is fun or easy. My life is more uncomfortable than it was before. There are things I wish I could be doing that, we have trips canceled. I have restaurants that I want to go back into. But at the end of the day, this is an opportunity for me, for you, for Lemonly, for schools, for children, to learn a lot about ourselves, to learn a lot about our friends and our neighbors, and to really come out of this stronger. And so I share that Rockefeller story to think about mindset. So that transitions us well into what I call the laws of leadership and sort of the new laws of ways to think about leadership. So I'm going to go through these and then we'll take some questions. So the first one, I'm not doing very well right now in this example, is that leaders need to stand up. And this is a double meaning. It means stand up both physically, shoulders back, get your core up. I have numerous stories and examples of as a young leader, I started a company at 23 years old, and I go back, my team makes fun of those pictures. I had my hair like shaved because I was trying to probably look older. I would wear like a shirt and tie and a vest to try to look more professional. Now I basically just wear a black t-shirt all the time. But standing up both physically, there's a lot of science to what that means for your breath, for your body, for your brain, and how you're thinking. But there's even more science to what that means to the psychology of how people treat you, respect you, perceive you. And so I'm sure teachers know this more than anything. You guys are up front in classroom. You're trying to get attention. You're trying to get awareness, focus, and people to really think and be focused. And so stand up physically, but also leaders need to stand up for what they believe in. And that's that core values, right? The worst place I think you can be as a leader is in the middle. Ideally, we all can be politicians, right, and make everybody happy, but it's just not the real world. I don't want the divisiveness and so much of the polarization of our world. I think we need to compromise, and this leads into the next point really well. But we do need to stand up for what we believe in, and you have to make it known for what you believe in, and being bold in that sets you apart as a leader. And again, you don't need the job title, you don't need the big salary to do that. So leaders stand up. Leaders also listen, right? And that's what I was going to say here about compromise. And so the story here, I'll talk about this later, but I started a podcast about mid to late June. 10 episodes in. It's called Lead More. And it's really the whole ethos of sort of this talk is that I believe we need more leaders. So the premise is let's learn from leaders of the past and present so we can create more leaders for the future. Episode 1, I talked with Governor Dennis Dugard, and we sat down and we talked. I guess it was on Zoom, so we didn't sit down next to each other. But we talked about leadership, and one of the things he said leaders need to do is listen, and they need to show up. And so he referenced for him when the tornado hit Wessington Springs years ago during his administration, and the first thing he did was get to Wessington Springs and be on the ground and sit there and listen, not talk, not give a big rah-rah speech about how he's going to fix everything, how he knows all the answers, how he will do what's best and what's right for everyone. He shut up and he listened. He talked about hearing the story of a woman who lost her home where she had lived there for 40 years and really sitting there and listen to the struggle that she's going through and the things that she lost and what that place meant to her and what that town and that home meant to her. Leaders listen, and I think that's actually a hard one because often if you are a leader, you're probably pretty confident in your ability. You're probably pretty confident in your ideas. You probably, if you're like me, don't do a great job of filling silence, or I try to fill silence. I don't do a great job with silence. So you need to shut up and you need to listen and really get to know what people are thinking. So this can be your students, this can be your teachers, your principal, your administration, your school board. We need to listen first before we talk first. And so that's a big thing that leaders do. In the past, the best ones do this. In the future, all leaders have to do this. So the next one, hopefully I've done this so far, and I want to, the rest of the talk is to tell a story. So at the end of the day, Lemonly, we are storytellers. I joke there's a concept in entrepreneurship that people talk about a lot called imposter syndrome. And the idea is essentially feeling a little like an imposter. You feel that maybe you don't belong. You feel like you're not good enough. You feel like maybe you kind of fell into a situation or circumstance that you didn't deserve. And I felt imposter syndrome for quite a while. I own a design company and I don't even know how to use Photoshop. I'm not a graphic designer. I barely know how to move any pixels around or use those tools, but yet we have some of the best designers in the world working with the best companies in the world. And what I found is that I offer a different value, right? I am a storyteller. I am a person who connects dots. I'm a person who uses the relationships and their networks to create value for each other so that we can create more value for others. And that serves a purpose. And so in the spirit of telling a story, this picture is great. This was a group of interns from the South Dakota Art Museum. This is over 3 years ago. This is like summer of 2017. I grew up in Brookings and my mother volunteers at the art museum. And so the director of the art museum at the time had said, hey, we have some young interns. They want to kind of go see other places. Lemonly is art related, in the graphic space, but can they come and talk to you and do an interview? And so I said, yeah, for sure. Back when we, worked here in the office. And so a group of young students came, we did a little Q&A like this, we did a talk. I love to do stuff like this. I love to help answer any questions. And the young woman in the dark hair, her hair down, Alex there, you can see. So this is 3 years ago, summer of 2017. And she came in and met and learned about Lemonly. Today, she's our intern. So 3 years later, after that day, she decided that I want to work here someday. And she actually showed a post that she had written a blog post or a note or something like that, after this day where she heard me talk, she said, I want to work at Lemonly someday. She's not a full-time employee. She's got to go back to grad school this fall, but I would totally hire her if she were. And so I think that's such a cool story that from this picture right here, this person I didn't even know, 3 years later, ended up back here at Lemonly. And so that's a story about the power of telling stories, right? That's a lot more interesting than me telling you that you should tell a story. So teachers, you guys know this better than anyone. I'm sure you teach through story, you teach through, analogies, and this is the way that our brain wants to work. So leaders are really good at telling stories. After they've listened, they can tell stories to connect, humanity, and they can connect purpose and in that engagement that we talked about earlier. This one is maybe a little bit different when I say the new laws, but I've come to learn that leaders build good habits. The story here, this is a talk that I gave. It was Sioux Falls Chamber of Commerce does a conference called the YPN Crossroads like every other year. So I think this is like 600 or 700 people that I gave a talk to. You know, they say that there are many people that say giving a public speech, they would actually rather die than give a talk in front of a group of people. This is something that people don't like to do and doesn't come natural to many. I'm a big baseball fan, and so I love using the analogy of getting at bats, right? Often minor league baseball players will have almost 1,000 at bats before they get called up to the major leagues. That's a lot of work. That's a lot, you know, it's Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours. And so one of the things, I like to give talks, but one of the things to do that is you have to give more talks. And so it may start with 4 interns from the art museum in just a small little room, and then someday become 700 people at a conference. The point is to build habits. And so one example I do that, I have this little habit, I've done this since 2012, I think. So today I did it for the 2,116th time. I call it my 8 for the day. I made my own little notebook. It's 6 professional tasks, 6 work things I need to get done every day, and 2 personal tasks. So that could be today I actually have to call the Sioux Falls the nice bats, because we're pretty sure we have bats in our attic again, and my wife could hear them in the morning, so she doesn't like that. So that's a personal task, or go for a run, or cook dinner, or hang out with my girls. And the process, it's less about the actual task and more about the daily habit of planning your day, setting your priorities. And so what I've come to learn is great if before you want to become somebody, a marathon runner, a CEO, an athlete, a mayor, whatever the title or label you want to achieve, to become that person, you have to build the habits that that person would have, right? And so my favorite business book, if you're a book reader, is Atomic Habits. I actually think it should be taught at maybe even a high school, but certainly at a college level. I wish I would have read that book at 21 and not 31 or whenever I read it a few years ago. And so the idea is that every day your habits are a vote for the person that you want to become. And so if you want to become a marathon runner, you have to get outside and run a mile. And that might be it for the first day. It might be it for the first month or even year, but you have to build habit of being a runner. So good leaders build habits in all ways. Personal, could be writing thank you notes and being grateful. It could be reading books and getting smarter and testing your mind. Whatever the label you want to achieve, first unpack the habits that person has, and then you can achieve that. And then lastly, I think I couldn't come up with the best way to describe this one, but leaders, they connect caring. And what I mean by that is they recognize the power of relationships. So I just did, the episode will go live on Thursday for the podcast, but with President Stephanie Herseth-Sandlin, obviously former Congresswoman, now president of Augustana University here in Sioux Falls. And the powerful takeaway from our conversation with her was the impact of relationships, and how throughout her life she can point to these specific people, these specific conversations, these moments where people have really guided her or influenced her life and really shaped where she's headed. She actually was an executive at Raven Industries here in Sioux Falls, had an intern who was going to law school because she was like she was chief legal at Raven. And when Augustana started doing their search for their next president, one of the last things the consultants who were helping Augustana said, sometimes it's worth putting a call out to your alumni and just saying, do you have any person you think would make a great candidate for the president of this whole school? So this, they paid some consultancy a bunch of money to help do a national search. And what happened was an email to alumni. This kid was a intern at Raven, and he responded. He said, I think Stephanie Herseth-Sandlin would be great. And they emailed her. She said she actually ignored the email at first because she thought I would never do that job, or like they would never pick me. That changed, obviously. She ended up responding to that email eventually and got the job, because an intern, someone that she said, leaders, I learned from leaders, not just who are older than me or more experienced, but younger as well, made that connection. So when I say connect caring, it's connecting people and relationships. This picture here is with my co-founder, Amy. And I'll tell this last story and then we'll wrap up. But when we started the business, we had a client in in Brookings, and we needed someone to help us for 10 hours a week to do some work. And so I went to a professor at SDSU and said, who are your best students? And she gave me a list of about 3 names. We interviewed all of them. Amy here was a graphic designer and advertising, like double major. This is before Lemonly. I should have said that. This is my first company that I had started with my brother. And we had a client in Brookings that we would drive up every week to do the work for them. And we're like, this just doesn't work. They're paying us $250 a month or something. That's a whole nother talk about learning how to actually do business. I learned that the hard way. And so Amy's like, well, I can do that. I know how to like post content on Facebook, but I'm also a graphic design major if that helps. And we said, maybe we could use her to like make a poster or design a tabletop. This is a restaurant we were working with. And little did I know that moment, Amy became our first employee at our first company called 9 Clouds, would eventually lead to becoming my co-founder of a design business. So the reason I can own a design business and not know how to use Photoshop is because Amy is our creative director, and we really fit well together with our strengths and weaknesses. And so connecting these relationships and connecting people who care about you and caring about others is a thing that leaders do, so that for the rest of your life, recognizing that every person you meet, every student you teach, every fellow colleague, not only could be your next friend, maybe your next business partner, maybe they work for you and maybe someday you work for them. I think that mentality of never burning a bridge and always trying to make connections is not only a smart way to live, but it's really South Dakotan thing to do. I think it's something we're really good at, right? It's the joke of the 6 degrees of separation. In South Dakota, it's just 2, right? To find an introduction or a connection to anyone in South Dakota, it's probably about 2 people away to get to who you're looking for. And so I think leaders recognize those dots and they connect them because they care. So that was my list of the laws of leadership. You stand up, you listen, you tell a story, build good habits, and make sure you connect caring. And so what I want to finish up with 2 final thoughts. I tweeted this a few months ago and it got a decent amount of reaction. I love Twitter. You can find me at John T. Meyer. If you're a Twitter person, we can talk. What I learned from what separates great from the good, this isn't just leaders, but people in general, is not sometimes the things we think of. Business, athletics, teaching, really anything. It's not connections or money, the timing of when you started or being in the right place, right time. Ideas or even smarts. It's pretty simple. At the end of the day, I've met a lot of successful people, and as I studied or read about successful people, it's that real winners, they love to do the work. They have those habits, and every day they wake up and they do the work, and it's hard work, and that's why they win, because they're willing to do it. And so I think there's a lot to be said. What teachers do so much hard work and get up every day, 5 days a week for 9 months a year to teach in what's a very thankless job, but very important work. So I'll leave with this concept, and then I saw we have a couple questions that we can talk about. This happened about 2 years ago at our company retreat, and one thing that I noticed, and hopefully this may resonate with you guys or potentially for your students, I started noticing from my team, which again is a younger group of people. I learned that a few of them were, seeing counselors, which is great, but we were reading reading these headlines, this is even pre-COVID, about an increase in anxiety, an increasing rates in depression and even suicide, especially among young people. And that was concerning to me. It's something that when I would read it, both as a father and as a CEO, just, made me worried. And what I kind of dug into is I just learned it's really hard. We live in a world where, I have my phone here. I can live really the highlight reel of someone else's life by just swiping through with my thumb. And on Instagram, it's just a filtered, perfect version of someone else's life, which makes you often feel inadequate, not good enough, not pretty enough, not smart enough, not successful enough, right? And it becomes very challenging, and we get trapped in what I call the comparison game. And I think that some of my people might have been in that as young people trying to start their career. Were they making enough? Were they growing fast enough? Was their life, moving quick enough or on the right trajectory? And I said to that group at our retreat, to my team, look, you should compare yourself to nobody. Actually, you should compare yourself to one person, and that's who you were yesterday. That's it. So who was John Meyer yesterday, and how can I be better than that person? How can I be a better father, better CEO, a better husband, a better runner, a better reader, a better son, a friend, all the titles and labels that I have in my life? How could I be better? And so from that came this mentality that we call better every day. And the concept is, if you can get 1% better, right? Just 1%. If any math teachers here, the compound interest of that, the compound effect of 1% better every day is, astronomical. And Einstein said compound interest is man's greatest invention. And so what does compound interest look like in your life as a teacher, as a husband or wife, as a son or daughter, as a friend, as an administrator, as a runner, a reader, whatever the titles or labels? And so that's what better every day is. Just compare yourself to who you are, because there's a lot going on in life right now. It's pretty heavy stuff. And that's when we talk about, both as a company and as individuals, we're going to come out of this stronger and better, and so that we're ready to seize the day, not only now, but certainly when this pandemic is over. So I'll end with that. Got about 10 minutes to spare. A couple little calls to action. If you want to, you can check out wherever you listen to podcasts. It's on Apple, it's on Spotify, it's on Stitcher. The Lead More podcast, like I said, I think we're about 9 episodes in. We do that weekly. Every Thursday, we drop a new episode. Check that out. And then lastly, if you like any of these thoughts, both on leadership or mindset, I have a new tool that's pretty cool. It's just text messaging. It's a group text messaging where I send usually 2 texts a week to the group, either a quote or a fact or a new tool that you should check out or a book to read related to leadership and mindset. It's completely free. You just sign up at that number, text that number, anything. You can text whatever you want. The word, just text to the 605 number, and then you opt into that list if you want to get more content like this. So thank you for listening. I will, let's see, what will I do? I will stop my sharing of the screen. Oh, cool. Now I can finally see all your guys' faces. And we can take questions. So let's see here. Is there a story, Chelsea, is there a story behind the name Lemonly? There's the real story, there's the real story and the marketing story. So the marketing story is that we take your boring lemons, your boring data and information, and turn it into lemonade. So from lemons to lemonade, right? Always sweet, never sour. Make it interesting, make it compelling, make it simple, make it taste good. The real story is the first company I started was called 9 Clouds Inc. 9 with the number 9, and then clouds, the clouds in the sky, and then ink. Turns out my brother and I didn't really know what the difference between Inc. We were actually an LLC. We called ourselves an Inc. because it sounded important and official. But always explaining that it was the number, John with an H, like the email was really, really frustrating and got really annoying quickly. And so we said, we need something simple and easy. And the domain Lemonly was available. It just kind of rolled off your tongue and originally we were lemon.ly because that was a different domain thing. And then we were able to buy the .com, which is a whole other story I can tell in a different day. But so that's the name. It has served itself well. We've sent, when you sign up to be a client with Lemonly, you get lemon bars in the mail that we send to our clients that they love. We've done lemon themed cocktail recipes at Christmas with the ingredients in the basket. And so I got my yellow water bottle, my yellow watch, right? Got to be on brand. But it really wasn't that way when we started it. A brand is really what you make it, not just what you call it. So Amber, how do you keep your team motivated despite conflicts, obstacles, and locations? Yeah, a lot of what we just talked about in this talk, it's really hard. I think that weekly pulse check is so crucial. That's why we do that Monday morning meeting to get on the same page, celebrate the wins, recognize the hard work people are putting in. Understanding too that we'll get through this, right? Showing them that this is a hurdle, and this is by no means like I said, sunshine and rainbows and unicorns, right? This is hard, and it's impacted some people more unfairly too than others. We haven't been impacted equally. And so letting them know, acknowledging the hard work, but also recognizing that we'll get through this. I think that helps. And then just that one day at a time, right? That better every day, just one day at a time. And that's why I think it's so important too, to recognize you have your own family, right? Go recharge, go one thing we're really changed, I think, in this more asynchronous world is like, if you need to go for a run at 1 o'clock, assuming you don't have a client meeting, like go for that run at 1 o'clock. And I've seen people, we aren't asking people to be online or join calls, but I have seen emails sometimes come in at the evening, or tasks get done at a different time of day, or even on Sunday. We don't tell anyone to do that. We just say, get your work done wherever and whenever. I think that helps people stay motivated to do what they need to do for themselves. Giving them permission to do that, I think, is the important part. Kay said, how do you create a culture where it's okay to fail? Perfect segue. On the first day when you join Lemonly, whether you're an intern or an employee, you'll meet with me for a one-on-one. We sit in this room probably. And I say this thing, I say, Lemonly is a place of ask for forgiveness instead of permission. And that started a little bit out of necessity. We were just a handful of 20-somethings, probably grossly underpaying people because we didn't have any money. And we couldn't really have any, we didn't have a lot of authority to hire people. I probably didn't feel equipped to manage anybody older than me. And so we were just a group of young, probably under-skilled and underqualified, scrappy people kind of working together. So what we did have was permission to fail and permission to try things and make mistakes. And I just say, I've switched it to you will make mistakes, not if. So you will make mistakes, but when you do, learn from them. And hopefully let's just not make them again. And so that's been super powerful. With our internship program, I mentioned Alex. Of our 17 people, I think 8 of them are interns, or were interns, I should say, over the years. And so it's been not only a great pipeline for recruiting talent, but it's also been a great place to kind of train and blossom and then hire people. And so we try to establish that early, because if they feel like the repercussions of failure are too great or screwing up is too great, then they won't take chances. So good question. Anyone else? Those are all of them that I see in the chat.
All right. Well, thanks, John. It was super interesting, and I know everybody, I'm sure, got a lot of out of all your tips and things to think about. And I know I wrote down a ton of stuff that I'm going to do after this.
Great, awesome. Well, thank you, Amber. I appreciate the time, and thanks for letting me be here and share some thoughts. Good luck to everyone this fall. And if anyone needs anything, like I said, that text message thing, you can text me, or my email is john@lemonly.com too, if anyone needs my email.
All right. Thanks again. Have a good afternoon.
All right, take care, everybody. Be safe.
Bye-bye.
Be well.